Some say love is a winding road, carves a map through the darkest night. Some say love takes a heavy load, helps someone make the burden light, teaches you not to hold too tight. You and I have come a long way together. You and I got a long way to go. You don't have to ask me now and never.
Oh, I do wish Lexi was still my daily driver. I'm so excited driving this car again. It's stupid, it really is. But as some of you may know, she was my daily driver for 5 years. But for the last few months, I've only driven this car on and off because she needs her head gasket doing. More on that in a minute. But yeah, she was my daily driver. She will be again at some point. And as my daily driver, she used to do everything. She would do tip runs. She would help people move furniture, small bits of furniture. She's ferried me and the kids around for the last 5 years. And yeah, she takes a little bit more sympathy than some cars and some of your more modern things. You know, we don't have the modern gadgets that you'd expect of a newer car. But she's how old now? 19? She's 19 years old now. So yeah, she's getting on a bit. But I'm so happy just still to be driving her today. It's funny, I went to the supermarket the other day and I decided I'll take Lexi. And I was like a kid at Christmas. Like, even I was shocked at how excited I got just driving Lexi to the supermarket. But then she is my pride and joy, and whatever it is that you have that's your pride and joy, you know, you do take pride in that, whatever it is. And if it's a vehicle, you take pride in that vehicle. Beautiful place, Cockington. And one of the reasons why I love this car so much is simply because of how she bloody looks. Even after driving through all that mud and leaves coming through Cockington, I never get bored of driving this car.
Some say love is a winding road, carves a map through the darkest night. Some say love takes a heavy load, helps someone make the burden light, teaches you not to hold too tight.
One thing about driving a classic or modern classic is you've got to be prepared for rust, and more rust. So one thing that I did recently was that chassis leg just there. And it's a shame because it didn't turn out the way I hoped it would. You see, one of the layers, whether it was the base, the primer, the high build, the top, something reacted with something else and it all started bubbling again. And it does look, don't get me wrong, this looks 100 times better than it looked before, but it is going to need redoing. And I think about all the other things that I've done on this car already, like the rust that was on the inner wings there and there, and then there was rust in the rear wheel arch. Only the one, really odd. This wheel arch had rust in. A couple of plates needed in that wheel arch. Front bumper mounts needed doing. It's all rust. I got away with the floors. I'm really lucky with the floors. This wheel arch, front right wheel arch, that one had some, I say some, that one had a lot of rust in it. That needed a lot of work. But now, I'm happy to say, she is rust free. But you do need to have a level of mechanical sympathy to own a classic or a modern classic. For me, I will clean her floors by hand, clean her wheel arches by hand, at least once a year, maybe twice, depending on what I'm doing, depending on what work I'm doing to the car. So she has her MOT in 6 weeks. I will definitely be cleaning her floors and her wheel arches in a couple of weeks' time, just to check, just to make sure that she's okay, that the rust hasn't crept back in, and to address anything that might creep in, because every now and then these things do creep in. I think it last year, last year there was a little spot of rust in her back left wheel arch, and when I actually started poking at that, it's a good job I found it, because by this year it would have been a hole. Managed to find that, treat it last year. That's still actually looking fine. So I have done dozens and dozens of jobs on this car over the years. I remember doing the exhaust manifold, the cat, the exhaust, the alternator, the cam belt. There's not much that I haven't done on this car. I've had the gearbox out, done the clutch, done the drive shafts. There really isn't much that I haven't done on this car. And she does run really, really well, despite that dodgy head gasket. And the head gasket is something that I've never done. So why didn't I ever get round to doing her head gasket? Well, I could have just taken her off the road for a week, few weeks, few months, however long it would have taken. Would have taken a little bit of time, because of course I would have had to have taken off her cylinder head, sent it off, get it skimmed, get it rebuilt, done anything that needed to be done. But I don't really like being without a car. I could have used the motorbike. I thought about that, shall I use the motorbike? But really I wanted to make sure that I still had a car. And so therefore we bought Mr. Leaky Diesel over there. I haven't actually named him yet, and there is a reason why I call him Mr. Leaky Diesel. And he does look good. I don't want to detract from how good this car looks. And in the end, whilst trying to make a decision as to whether to buy a temporary car or not, I started thinking about 306s and the fun I'd had in them in the past. And then I went to Peugeot Festival and I started looking at 306s. And then in the end, the decision wasn't, do I want to buy a temporary car? It turned into just an excuse to buy a 306. And so we bought this 306 HDI and we got him home, drove home really, really well. And then this is when things started not going quite to plan. We had to fix his brake pipe that was hanging down. There was a dust shield that was loose. Part of his rear caliper was also loose. And he had seized brake pads, a hole in the exhaust, an ABS wire that was loose, a brake pipe that wasn't in the right place. And so we did all of that, we overcame all of that, and finally started driving the car. And at that point I thought to myself, finally, I'm in a 306 again, it's great, I love it. It was really nice to be back in a 306. And I felt like it needed a shakedown. So we went to Stamford Hall, and he drove rather well. And then he got back, and I decided, right then, now's the time. I'm gonna make this my daily and fix Lex's head gasket. And then the next round of problems began. We had to go and pick up a sofa in a 306, and so I took out the passenger seat and we managed to get the sofa in and then out, in and out several times before we finally worked out how to actually get it to fit in the car. In it went, everything was in, fine, right then let's go, let's get this sofa to its destination. And the car wouldn't start. I didn't find out why he didn't start. I suspect it was fuel related, because when I went back the next day to start him, he just started and drove absolutely fine. And so I still had the confidence in the car. From our trip up to Stamford, I still had the confidence in the car, and so I decided, yeah, I'm going to keep driving him. Went out the next day to find that Mr. Leaky Diesel really had leaked a puddle of diesel onto the road. And it turned out that where he was actually leaking from was the top of the fuel tank. What had happened there is I had filled up with diesel, and it turned out that it was actually the fuel pump where it fits into the top of the tank. The seal was dodgy, it wasn't sealing properly, and so what had happened is I'd filled up the tank and it had all leaked out from the top of the tank, so I didn't lose as much as I could have done. And the really odd thing about that is that where Peugeot have fitted the pump, they've also given us that access panel, but they're not in the right place. They're a little bit offset, so it was rather difficult actually getting in there to do that job. And of course I couldn't do that job until I'd ordered the parts for it. And whilst I was waiting for parts, I decided to address some of the other little problems that cars have. So the gear knob was too loose and it was too low, and the whole thing didn't work. I was fortunate enough to get a second-hand gear knob from a Peugeot 206 with an adapter, fitted perfectly. And what I noticed was there's a lot of weight in the original Peugeot gear knobs, which actually you need because there's not much throw to the actual gear linkage. So that's now working properly. The seatbelt, the top mounts on the seatbelts, the driver's one was bolted on completely incorrectly. There was bits missing. The passenger one wasn't much better. So I replaced the whole mechanism. I managed to get some from a 206. They look a little bit different, but they fit and they work really well. So safety sorted on the seat belts. There was another loose ABS wire in that wheel arch there. Then we had the battery clamp, new battery, but it wasn't bolted down, so that was a definite MOT failure, if ever we get that far, of course. So battery is clamped back down. We still need a horn, and that's rather frustrating as well, because I was just about to buy a horn when I found all the leaky diesel. But yeah, we still need a horn. So embarrassing. That horn is so embarrassing. But then at the same time, as embarrassing as that horn is, it's actually turned out to be quite a safety feature, because much as I like to think I have my road rage under control, when someone's cut me up and I've forgotten I've got a dodgy horn, I've bibbed the horn and it's made that sound, and it's just made me laugh. I think it's a safety feature. It just diffuses the situation. It doesn't matter if I'm the one that's made the mistake or they're the one that's made the mistake. If I bib that horn, we both just start laughing, and there's no problem. I do need to change the horn, but I am going to miss the comedy side of having such a horn. So after doing all of those jobs and he was running again, someone said to me, "Pete, what you've actually done here is you've gone and bought yourself another project car." And I can't argue that, I really can't. I had no intention of buying myself a project car, but with all the work that I've had to do to this car, it's nothing less than a project car. And I should have known better. Buying a Peugeot 306 that's 21 years old, I think it was always going to be a bit of a project car. In fact, 15 years ago, I bought a 6-year-old 306, and that was not quite a project car, but it had a few things it needed doing. It had a chunk missing out of the bumper, which I'm ashamed to say I never actually fixed that. The driver's window, I put the driver's window down on the way home. I was about 100 miles away from home. I put the driver's window down and it wouldn't go back up. And that car was actually quite a comical one. My girlfriend at the time started driving that car. There was nothing wrong with it, it drove fine, but for her it would cough and splutter, and it even broke down the once for her. So she rings me up, "Pete, I hate this car, it's this, that and the other, and I've broken down at Sainsbury's." You know, all the sort of things that you'd say if you'd broken down. So I hopped in the car that I had at the time, Mark 1 MR2 T-Bar, drove down to Sainsbury's, and I get there and she says, "Do you want me to pop the bonnet?" I said, "No, I want you to move into the passenger seat." So she scooches over, I gets in the driver's seat of this 306, and it started and it drove home. For me, it behaved itself. Well, in the last couple of weeks, in this car, we've picked up another sofa, and we've picked up a fridge freezer in this car, and it's been absolutely faultless. So perhaps after all this time, after all these jobs that we've had to do and all these little niggling things that we've inherited with this car, perhaps now I can finally start driving it and start enjoying it. I'm not even gonna say when I'm gonna do Lexi's head gasket, because I'm at that point now where I want to drive this car for a few months, I think, just to be sure, because twice now I've gone to start her head gasket and then something's happened with this car, and I've actually been thankful of the fact that I hadn't started that work. So maybe I'll give this one a couple of months. During that time we'll get Lexi's MOT done, and then we'll start Lexi's head gasket, and once that's done I can look at getting this car an MOT. I mean, I do love this era of car. They are so simple in comparison to much of what you would get today. At the moment there is a bit of a debate amongst my friends and family as to whether, thank you, as to whether I am ever going to get this car an MOT. Well, we're working through these little niggling problems and there are still some other jobs to do, but I've never failed to get a car an MOT, and so it feels like I've set myself a challenge now of, can I get this car an MOT? Once it is MOT'd, assuming that I get an MOT, once it is MOT'd, I will be looking to sell this car on. And again, this is why I want to drive it for a few months, because I want to know that what I'm selling on is worthy, and that the new owner isn't going to have a problem, and certainly isn't going to have the catalogue of problems that I've had with this car. So I would love to drive this car for a few months, get an MOT, and then I'll look at selling it on. As much as I don't want to sell it on, you know, I want to keep this car. It's been many years since I had a 306, and having another one, I know it's going to be difficult to get rid of this car, but there are other cars that I want to own and drive, even if I just own them for a year, drive them, get them out of my system, and then move them on. There's plenty of them that I want to have over the years. So this car will need to make room. Obviously I'm going to keep Lexi because she's my forever car, but I need to make room for other cars, other little projects. I wonder if I can buy a BMW Mini for 500 quid. That sounds like a challenge.